call. Thank you all for joining. Today we have a very special speaker. We have Michael Ibarra, who is a security engineer covering the Pennsylvania area, and he will be discussing automating the first-time configuration wizard. As always, for any questions, please use the Q&A. We'll save those for the end. Michael's going to be doing a short presentation and a demo. So with that said, Michael, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. And hello and welcome to this installment of Tips and Tricks. And I'm really just so glad you could join me. My name is Michael Ibarra, and like Kyle mentioned, I'm a security engineer with Check Point. And I'm a relatively new Check Point employee, but I was a longtime customer in the network architecture and engineering world. So I'm excited to share with you today some of the things I've recently discovered and put into practice as we look at some of the lesser known automation capabilities of the first-time config wizard. So just a quick overview on the agenda here. We're going to take a look at the first-time wizard as you probably have seen it, some of the challenges there as well. And then we're going to move into a script that's been around for a while called config system. After we look at that, we're going to focus on some ways that we can automate that even further to make your deployments of new gateways and appliances even easier. So with that, we will step right into the next section. So the first-time config wizard rather, is something that you're probably familiar with if you've spent any time at all around Check Point products. It's a necessary part of any hardware or software-based virtualized deployment. As soon as you get a gateway out of the box, you power it up, you connect it to the network. This is a required interactive web-based wizard that you have to move through in order to complete the config and then actually get to the real work, which is configuring interfaces and setting up other sorts of policies and so on. And this wizard has actually been around for about 10 years, since R75.40, but was likely in development before even then. And so it's been around for long enough for us to at least expect to see it. And one of the challenges that I've seen over the years, and you probably have too, is that you can't simply proceed with these same steps through the command line. You have to go through the web interface. And that can be challenging if you have not only a very large number of appliances to deploy at once. It makes it difficult to scale or use easily there. But if you have an environment where you are setting up an appliance that's maybe console access only, maybe you don't have web access to it right out of the box, that's going to be difficult as well. So the challenges certainly are obvious, but I want to share something that can, I think, be really a game changer. There is a bash script called config system that can automatically apply, the GUI-based settings without you needing to click through a single user interface-based step. Now, config system is actually a bash script that resides on any modern version of Gaia, and it calls other sub-functions through TCL or Tcl scripts as needed, applying those same actions that the GUI-based first-time wizard typically does instead. Now, this script can be run as either a one-time single-line command with all of your arguments and flags sort of embedded in this very long, depending on how long it is, line of characters, or it can be applied using a list of key value pairs inside of a plain text answer file. If you're familiar with Docker, the difference is similar to using the Docker run command, where you have a single line with all of your settings and so on, or using Docker compose, where you have an external YAML formatted file that's really in some ways just the same key value pairs. And that gives you all the necessary instructions the command needs to complete. So you're welcome to use either the single line or the plain text answer file, but I've found the answer file to be far more customizable, easier to troubleshoot, and reusable across different systems or deployment requirements. So that's the one that we're going to be looking at today. Finally, because this is a bash script, you can control it using languages like Python, or even tools using Ansible or Terraform, to name a few. And because it's a text-based file, you can include things like version control using Git. So there's really a huge number of flexible options for you as you begin using this. All right, so enough slides. Let's jump into the actual demo. So what I'm going to do here quickly is just show a SSH session that I have. Hopefully you can all see that. And what you'll first realize is that this is way too small. So let me make that a little bigger. This is a gateway that I've just deployed, brand new. It's a virtual environment. You can see right here at the very top, it's asking me, hey, please access the web UI and finish the first time wizard. But I don't really want to do that because that's something I'm used to doing, and that's going to be really outside the scope. So what I'm going to do instead is jump into expert mode, and I'm going to take a look at the directory that I currently have here, which is simply my home directory. And the first thing you'll notice is I have this file here that I want to show you. And this is an automatically generated file that you can create using the config system command. And the syntax for that is config system create template, and then you would just simply give it a name. So I'll go ahead and just create this again. And now if I look at the list of files, you can see there's the date modified, and there it is. Now what this is, it is a guide or a template or even sort of a reference of all the different fields that you can use either in your answer file or in your single line version as you configure these. This is a pretty lengthy list of things, but it gives you a great set of tools that you can use looking at this. So I just wanted to show you this for reference. It's a great resource, but we're gonna quit out of that for now and move on. Now, I mentioned earlier, you can use any one of these options with either the single line approach or the interactive approach. So what I've done here is I've put together a single line example of what this command would look like if I wanted to configure this gateway with all the different properties that I want to apply. So take a look at that. You can see not only the length of this is all a single line, of course, but take a look at all the stuff in here. You'll notice that we have properties like host name, right? And you have these ampersands that separate each of these values. Now, I don't know about you, but that could be a really difficult command to keep track of and make sense of. And not only that, but scale this across to, other systems. So we're not going to apply that, although you could. What I'm going to do instead is I'd like to show you what it looks like if we run through the individual interactive scripts that I've put together here. So I've made this executable. Again, it's just a bash script. So we're going to run through that now. All right, so here it is. It's asking me for my desired admin password, which you'll probably recall is one of the first windows inside the first time config wizard. So I'm going to put a password in there. And if I fat finger that, it's going to bark at me and say, sorry, please try again. So, all right, let's try that again. All right, so here's the next field. But before I move on to that, I just want to briefly review this string right here. This is a password hash. And what that is it's a sort of a, trying to think of the right word. It's really a obfuscated form of the original password that I typed in. And this is used inside the Gaia CLI and in other areas for safely putting in sensitive details like passwords. Fun fact, I didn't know this actually until recently, but these $ actually are delimiters. They show the beginning of new types of information. So this $6 actually refers to this being a hash generated using SHA-512. This next $sign and the characters after it represents the password hash's salt, or a randomized value that can be included to generate the actual string. This final string here is the actual password. So whatever I typed above, this is the transformed result. So I thought that was interesting. I just wanted to pass that along as well. All right, so we're going to continue on here. My host name that I'm going to apply. Obviously, you can see up here, there's no tricks. This is the default host name out of the box. This is the new one. I'm going to type my SIC key for when I attach this to an SMS. And maybe I fat finger that one as well. Oh, you know what? I actually typed that right. So we'll move on. Let me enter in a static address here for my management. I'm going to put in a subnet mask length. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to use something simple. But suppose I mistype that. Maybe I type 33 or laughably large, like a 64. Well, that's not going to work. So it's asking me to put in something else. I'm going to do the equivalent of this, which is a class C, or in CIDR notation would be a /24. My default gateway, I'm going to mark that as well. And my domain name, I'll make that something simple. All right, so on to DNS. I do have my own DNS server internally, so I'll set that. And I'm going to use Cloudflare for my secondary and tertiary. You don't have to use these, by the way, they're optional, but you can if you want. Now, this next one is asking for a time zone format in TZ database syntax. If you're familiar with Unix or Linux, this will probably be really almost second nature at this point, but I'm going to use New York since I'm on the East Coast. You can use anything you like. Moving on, the primary NTP server, I could keep the default, but I'm going to change it up a little bit. Time.apple, why not? Time.microsoft for the second. And so finally, we're at the very end of our wizard here. And you probably can recall that we have these individual questions at the very end saying, hey, where can we make these choices where we say, yes, let's upload this to user center, let's download Blade information, contract info. What if I don't want the defaults there? I can choose, no thanks. I don't want the defaults. I'm going to make my own choice. And you can ignore the healthy dose of snark here. That's just joking around a little bit, but do I want to download info from the UC? No, I don't. Do I want to upload info from the UC? Sure, why not? Do I want to upload crash data, which might contain potentially sensitive, personally identifiable information? No, definitely not. So you can play around with these values and choose whatever you'd like. All right. Lastly, should the gateway reboot automatically when the config is complete? Sure, that saves me a step. Why not? All right. So that's the end of the configuration. What the script does next is it takes all the values that I've put in here and it checks them. It checks them against whether or not they can actually be applied and if we're ready to do this for real. So sure enough, the values check out and I can finally say, yes, let's proceed. Let's apply for real. So I'm going to hit yes and off we're running. So we're configuring products right now. While this is running, I'm going to jump back over to the presentation just to cover a couple of other things while we wait for that to complete. So if you'll bear with me, I will grab that in just a moment. All right, so there's our demo. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you, and this is sort of a, this is actually on the system itself right now, but what does an answer file look like exactly? We saw that template that I generated with all those different values and comments, but the bare minimum that we need to have in this file are simply key value pairs, each on a new line. And this is what makes this approach so powerful, because you can populate a new file or append to a file very easily, or you can come up with a completely different approach altogether. It's really subject to your creativity. As long as these values are in here with the right syntax separated by new lines, that is all you need. So one of the other things I was going to just run quickly through here is giving you a list of resources that you can use to maybe take your own approach to this. You know, I've talked about config system. I've written this bash script as an example, but these SKs here are enormously helpful with giving you the tools to be able to take this one step further, or maybe change it around entirely and approach it in a very different way. The other one that's really helpful is the Gaia R81 administration guide. This goes really in depth with all the different flags and key values that you can have within the config system answer file or the single line command. So while we are waiting on this to reboot, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. But Kyle, I wanted to make sure, do you have any questions that I can maybe handle from the audience?
Absolutely. I got several questions that have come in. So first and foremost, one of the questions that came in is with the single line configuration file, if the password contains an ampersand in the hash, what happens?
That is a great question. I'm glad you asked. So one of the requirements about that exact field is that you encompass your password string in single quotes. So I don't have it up on the screen to show you this, but if you generated a hashed value and you put it in there, what you would end up with is admin hash equals single quote, then the full string, and then a single quote. And what that does is it protects that string, even if there's an ampersand, from being confused with the ampersands outside of that single quotes sort of encompassed area. Yeah, great question.
Right. And can this be used for SMB appliances?
Yes, yes, SMBs. So unfortunately not. This is a Gaia specific tool set, but what we can do for SMB appliances, there is a zero touch cloud service approach that you can certainly use. And that works really well for deploying SMB appliances without any need for attaching, console or web session or anything like that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And got one question, and there's two questions that came in and they're very similar. Can you modify this config file to check and download updates?
Sure. So for CPUs, you could certainly use a very similar approach to what I've done here with the bash script. You would want to make sure, though, that you are using the installer command instead of config system. Config system is only for the first time wizard, whereas installer would be for updating, downloading packages, applying hot fixes, and so on. Yep.
And then this ties into the next question from Braden: is config system a better option over using Blink deployment with an answer file?
Sorry, I didn't catch that first part. Is config system a better option
over using Blink deployment?
Blink deployments. Yes. You could certainly do Blink. That is a valid, great choice. The reason that I found config system to be useful is if I have a large deployment of appliances that maybe need configured, but maybe have very slightly different configuration on each. Whereas if I have Blink or even the isomorphic tool where I can put a lot of this in there, that's a static installer that has to stay the same across all those systems. So yes, Blink is certainly an option if you want to use it. I chose this because it gives you a lot of flexibility across different appliances that you're configuring.
And I'll add to that, one advantage over using Blink is that it does provide the ability for one single reboot without using the specific installer package command that Michael was referring to previously.
Yes. Yep. Perfect point. Yep.
Got a couple more questions.
Okay.
Is this FTW CLI script only for the gateway because we need SICK for it to run?
Great question. So this can be used to configure gateways or management appliances. I approach this with just a targeted proof of concept for gateways, but you could absolutely adapt this and use it for a manager or for even a standalone appliance where you have, a gateway running as manager and firewall in a single approach. And you would want to consult that list of templated key value pairs to make sure you have the right properties in there. But absolutely, you could do that too.
And I'll just put in the chat for everyone. This SK has a great reference to what Michael's referring to with the primary management as well as a standalone appliance for that answer file.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. That's great.
The other question came in, where can we get this script?
Sure. Yes, so that is something that we'll certainly make available I think there was some talk about posting this alongside the recording later on. We will work that out and make sure that we get that to you. I like to say, any of these sorts of tools, at least from me, please use CASE, which is an acronym that means copy and steal everything. I'm happy for you guys to take this and make it even better, because I am not a developer. I'm not a programmer. This was a very rudimentary approach for me, and I know for sure we probably have people on this call that can make this an outstanding tool, well beyond what I can do. So yes, we absolutely will make it available.
Right. And to answer the last question, thought it was just in the root folder when he logged in expert. That was actually the Michael's home folder when he logged in as expert.
Yes. Yep. And that was just me adding this. I created a new file using Vim. I copied in the contents and just put it there locally for the example today. Yeah.
And the config system command is there when you if you were just to type it in. It comes.
It is. Yep, exactly. That's config system is installed as a part of Gaia whenever you're doing any kind of new install, all the way back, I believe, since R75.40. It's been around a long time. Yep.
That covers all the questions. I'll turn it back to you, Michael.
Great. All right. So hopefully you can see the SSH session again. The gateway has rebooted, and we are now hopefully seeing the results of that script. So I'm going to jump back into expert mode. And the reason I'm going to do this is so that I can run a clish command and search for specific properties. So I know that I modified DNS, right? What does that look like? All right, that looks good. I have my lab local. I've got my 10.5.1.10, my Cloudflare. I know I checked NTP as well. I made some changes there. There's time.apple. What else? I did simple addressing changes. So that's good also. I think this looks good to me. Let's take it one step further though. Remember that answer file that I generated as I was running through this command? That answer file is still here, and I have it timestamped. So if you run this multiple times, you can say, okay, I know this is exactly the one that I was messing around with. But let's take a look at that. This is the raw content of that answer file that I was talking about previously. And these are all the fields and the values that I entered in here using this script. But notice the hash and the SIG keys. Those have been blanked out, haven't they? And that's a security mechanism that config system does. After they've been applied, those values are wiped out of the file for security reasons. So you can always go back and say, hey, what did I apply here, during this time? You can use this as not only a reference, but also as an auditing and compliance tool. So that's really, that's great too. All right, very last moment of truth. Let's open up a web browser and let's see if logging in gives me a final appliance state here. All right, here it is. I'm going to log in using the password I set. There it is. And here I am, ready to begin my additional config, whether it's adding more interfaces or other changes. Here's all the values that I had set previously, and that's looking really good. So that is it for the demo, everyone. I again want to thank you for your time. Just a brief recap here before we wrap up. Obviously, again, this tool is highly customizable and certainly doesn't have to be used in the way that I showed you. But today we looked at config system. Obviously, we automated using an interactive bash script that I had put together. And really what I hope you come away with from this is feeling empowered with the tool set to be creative and to take these things in an even greater direction towards really efficient use and working smarter instead of harder. So that's what my hope is for you all. Again, thank you for your time, and I'll hand it back to Kyle to bring us home.
Yeah, terrific. Michael, thank you so much. As always, I really do appreciate everybody joining the call this morning, and we will have our next call in 2 weeks. We do not have a topic yet, but that should be coming out this week. But Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you all.